Hello everybody, this is ARUNA KRITHIKA, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Applications, St.Joseph's College of Arts and Science, Cuddalore. Now here I am going to talk about constructors in C++. What is a constructor? How to define a constructor? What are all the types of constructors? How to use those constructors? These are the topics that we are going to discuss in this video. Now, let's see the definition for a constructor. What is a constructor in C++ called? Constructor is a special type of function which with no return type. It does not return any values. That's why it has no return type. Now, name of the constructor should be the same as the name of the class. So, as we give the name of the class, the same should be given as the name of the constructor. Now, we define a method inside a class. The same way, constructor is also a special method that is defined inside a class. A constructor is automatically called when we create an object of the class. So we introduce objects for a class in the main method. So when we try initializing the objects for that particular class, constructor, even if it is anonymous or if it is written, it will be called. Okay, right. Now, what is the use of a constructor? The main purpose of the constructor is to initialize the object and its initial state. So when we try introducing objects to the class, this constructor, even if we have not written a constructor inside a class, such type of a constructor we name as anonymous constructors. So the anonymous constructor or the constructor, if we have written anything in any order, will try to initialize all the member variables and member functions of class in memory. So this is the main purpose of the constructor. Now, how to write the syntax for the constructor? So there are two different methods how we can construct a constructor in a class, right? The first step is we can define the constructor method either inside the class or it can be written or defined outside the class. But anyway, it has to be declared inside the class. And we'll see the first type of syntax, that is class name along with the parameter list, then the definition of the constructor. This is the normal or typical syntax for a constructor. So the name of the class should be the name of the constructor method also, following which we can substitute the list of parameters if needed. So any number of parameters again can be given to that particular constructor as and how we need. Okay, then open a curly braces, try defining what is there inside that constructor, any manipulation that has to be done, and close the bracket. This is one type of writing the constructor. The second type is defining a constructor outside the class. Now if we need to define a constructor or a normal method outside the class, we will have to use the scope resolution operator. The same we are trying to use now. Class name, the first class name will actually represent the name of the class, then scope resolution operator, following which we'll have again a class name. No, this class name is the constructor, name of the constructor, followed by the list of parameters, then following which we'll have to define the manipulation code inside the constructor. So these are the two different types of syntaxes that we can use for defining a constructor either inside the class or outside the class. Then we'll see the characteristics of the constructor. So at the first instance, the name of the constructor will be the same as the name of the class. So this is the first characteristics to find out whether the method is a constructor or not. The second one is constructors are mostly declared in public section of the class, though it can be declared in private session of the class. So in general, normally what we try doing is that we define all the constructor methods only in the public access specifier mode. Then the next point, constructors do not return any value, hence they do not have a return type. We only write the class name and a list of parameters. We do not either give return type, either any preliminary return types or void or anything. We don't specify that. We only write the name of the class and the list of parameters, and we define it as a constructor. So it does not return any value. So it does not have return types. Then the constructor gets called automatically when we create the object of the class. So as discussed earlier, when we try creating objects for the class in the main method, the constructor gets called automatically. Okay, even if we don't explicitly call a constructor, the constructor will be called when we try to create object for the particular class. Then the next point, constructors can be overloaded. So that is, any number of constructors with a different type parameter list can be given inside a class. Then constructors cannot be declared virtual. So any virtual function cannot be a constructor. You cannot write a constructor and declare it to be virtual. Then here is an example for how to define a constructor within the class. Okay, here class student is being given. It has some member variables, and we have declared public access specifier. Underneath we have written the name of the class. So this is a constructor. You don't have any parameters. Some work is being done inside this constructor. And this is another method which is a normal method, and from the main method we try initializing the object, the class name, and S here indicates the object. Now when this line is executed, here the constructor is called. So this line will try executing, the control will move on to what is called the constructor method, and what is there written in this constructor method, it will be done. And again here we have used the object to call the normal method. This is not a constructor method, this is a normal method. So this is how we write a constructor within a class. Then we'll move on to look how we can define a constructor outside of the class. Okay, see, inside this class with the access specifier public, we have introduced a constructor. This is empty constructor. We have not defined what it has to do. Now remember, this constructor does not take any return type. Now after the definition of the class, here we try to define what has to be done inside the constructor method. So name of the class student, we make use of scope resolution operator. Then again, this student is the constructor method. So inside this constructor method we try to do some other work. Okay, then that is being called inside the main method as usual. Now we'll discuss on the number of types of constructors we have. Types of constructors. It is default constructor, parameterized constructor, overloaded constructor, constructor with default value, copy constructor, and inline constructor. So these are the different types of constructors we could find in C++ programming language. Now here in this video we'll be discussing on the first two types of constructor, that is default constructor and parameterized constructor. In the first instance we'll talk about default constructor. Default constructor is a constructor which does not take any argument. It has no parameters at all. This is also called as a zero argument constructor. Okay, we'll look at an example of default constructor. See, here is a class called construct and a constructor called construct. The name of the class will be entitled for the constructor method also. So constructor, and this does not take any parameter value at all. So there are no parameter values. So some manipulation is being done inside the constructor. We tried calling the constructor from the main method. Once we call the object, once we try introducing an object to the class, this constructor will be called automatically. Okay, this is how we try to write that is default constructors or non-parameterized constructors. Now we'll move on to the next type, that is called parameterized constructors. It is possible to pass parameters, arguments to constructors. Okay, so those arguments or parameters takes values inside the constructor method. Okay, typically these arguments help initialize an object when it is created. To create a parameterized constructor, simply add parameters to it the way you do to any other function. So how to add parameter to a method? The same method will be used for adding parameter list to constructors also. When you define the constructor's body, use the parameters to initialize the objects. Now we'll see how we can do it with an example. Now here there is a class called student, and we have a constructor method called student with 3 different parameters. One is integer parameter, then character array parameter, and a double parameter. Now while defining it, we try to manipulate all the parameters list that we have got here. Now we'll see how we are going to call this parameter in the main method. Look, this main method takes the name of the class space object. Along with the object, parameter list are passed. Now what have we passed? We have passed an integer, a character array, and a double valued data. So this line, when it gets executed, the control will switch on to what is called parameterized constructor definition. So whatever it is written here, it gets executed. This is how we try to call the parameterized constructor. Hope this is clear. So we have in this particular video discussed about what is a constructor, uses of constructor, characteristics of constructor, different types of constructor, and under discussion we were talking about default constructor and parameterized constructor. Hope this video would have been useful to you all. Thank you. So in coming videos, we will discuss about copy constructor and constructor with default values. Thank you all.